Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 7 of my 2023 reads. This week I read a bunch of different things that I had a bunch of different experiences with, some amazing and some not so much my taste, including a DNF. Also, I wanted to go ahead and wrap up the 2 HarperCollins titles that I had read in the past few months now that the HarperCollins union has come to an agreement with the company. Their strike is over and reviews are welcome to be released again. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. So first I finished The Shame Machine by Cathy O'Neill. I buddy read this with Emma at the Overstuffed Shelf, who I will link below. Both of us were interested in this because we had read her previous book, Weapons of Math Destruction, and absolutely loved it. So we thought, she's got a new book out, want to read it. And so we read it, but this book wasn't quite as good as her previous one. So this book is basically a bunch of different chapters taking a look at different aspects of shame, the way that shame is used to sort of kind of police people's behaviors, and the way that it can be really toxic, and how a lot of systems can be built to take advantage of people's shame, and especially, you know, how this can be monetized and things like that, like the wellness industry, where people are made to feel ashamed for how they look or you know, how their bodies are, in order to then buy into stuff like dieting or, you know, whatever else is being sold to them. And so it just kind of takes a look at all these different aspects. It takes a look at addiction and at homelessness, and at also some positive uses of shame, such as the Me Too movement. So it covers kind of a lot of these ideas. I think that for both of us, what we found was that as we were reading this, we were on board with a lot of the ideas, and many of them we'd come across before, and this wasn't necessarily going into more depth or bringing more arguments, and many times the kind of cohesiveness of the essay collections as a whole didn't really come together. The argument that was being made just didn't feel very strong. So good topic, and definitely some interesting ideas in there, but not sure that this is doing anything terribly new, and not sure that it's necessarily bringing it all together in a really cohesive and strong argument type of way. So overall, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Shubeik Lubeik by Deena Mohamed. This is a kind of fantasy graphic novel that was translated from Arabic into English, and it is absolutely fantastic. It's a new release. I absolutely love this. I'm gonna have a review for this up later this week. It's basically kind of an alternate version of our reality, but where wishes exist, and these are a commodity. They are packaged into different types of containers. There's different classes of them: 3rd class, 2nd class, 1st class, and this is all about a set of 3 first-class wishes that kind of get sold at a discount, and we see some people who buy them and use them, and sort of the things that they're dealing with and trying to figure out how to use these, what makes sense, what they want to wish for. It's a really fascinating look at contemporary Egyptian society through this fantastic lens. I thought that the artwork in this was also really fantastic. I loved the black and white lines. I loved the way that space and kind of the visual layout was done, and just it was very emotional as well. I thought this was such a fantastic graphic novel. So if you're interested in graphic novels, especially SFF ones, this is brand new release. I really highly recommend this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I will have a review up later. Then another book that I absolutely loved was Solito by Javier Zamora. So this is a memoir that I listened to on audiobook, and I picked this up because Cynthia at BookWhimsy has an excellent review for it. So I will link her channel and that review below. I really strongly recommend checking it out. And I'm gonna have a review up for this as well, probably in a couple of weeks. But it is just such a beautiful memoir. I loved this. I could not stop listening to it. Basically, this is about Zamora's experience when he was 9 years old, leaving El Salvador to cross the border through, you know, different countries, including Mexico, to get to the US, where his parents had been living for many years, because they'd left kind of political and economic situation in El Salvador, and they'd struggled to bring him over. And so finally they paid a coyote to bring him, but things did not go to plan. And so this is sort of about his unaccompanied journey across the border, and it is just so beautiful beautifully written. Zamora is a poet and you can feel it in the writing. And I just absolutely loved listening to this. So if you like memoirs, if you have any interest in sort of the social issues that are surrounding this, I think this was absolutely fantastic. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I definitely recommend checking out Cynthia's review, and my review will be up in a couple of weeks too. Then I read Iveliz Explains It All by Andrea Beatriz Arango. So this is a middle grade contemporary in verse about Iveliz, who is this teenager who is dealing with a lot in her life. She's got a lot of mental health issues and she is on medication. She's, going to therapy. She's dealing with it, but she still is having a lot of trouble, a lot of anger especially. She is kind of getting into fights at school, getting into a lot of trouble. And then at home, her grandmother from Puerto Rico comes to stay with them, and she's dealing with Alzheimer's, and also kind of doesn't believe in medication. And so Iveliz is just dealing with all these sorts of things in her life and really struggling with them. I think that this book is beautifully written. I think it's like really well done in terms of the characters and in terms of the ideas that it's exploring. This idea of mental health and everything that Iveliz is going through, I think was really well done. I loved also that this had some artwork throughout it. I thought that that was so cool. Just these little illustrations of what she's going through, and it's written almost like as a journal. So I thought that all of that was super cool. It is very heavy though. One of the things I generally like about middle grade is that it tackles heavy issues, but in a gentle way. This one was heavy issues in a heavy way. And so it was actually quite hard for me to get through this because it was just so heavy. There were such difficult emotions, and just so much kind of emotional distress for Iveliz and for her mom and her grandma and her friends, and it's just you sit in that for a while. So I think this book is doing some really great things, just talking about mental health and kind of showing that struggle, but it is pretty heavy to get through. So for me, this was 4 out of 5 stars. And then I did DNF a book, which I was so sad about, and that is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. I'd heard amazing things about this from so many different people, and I saved this for a rainy day when I needed to pick me up, and unfortunately it just didn't work for me. So I think that one of the issues with this book is that it's got a lot of humor, and I find that humor is something that's so hit or miss for me, and if it misses, it just falls flat, and that's kind of what happened in this book. And the other issue that I had with this book, that at 22% I was like, I think I'm done, is that the premise of this focuses on a woman who lives in this kind of fantasy world, and she ends up saving this demon, but the demon is quite dangerous. He's quite violent, and he ends up being pretty violent towards her and her family in the beginning before he gets to know them, and then later towards other people. And that violence, I think, in the story is supposed to make him kind of brooding and dangerous and sexy. And there's this one point where the heroine is thinking like, oh man, he's so dangerous. I don't know if I can be around this guy, but also he's so attractive. And I was like, you know what? I don't find that attractive. I don't think I can deal with this. So I didn't really get along with the humor, and I just didn't find that violence attractive. So for me, this didn't work, but I can totally see how this just could be a real escapist romp for so many other readers, and I think it has been, but just not my style. And then I wanted to go ahead and wrap up the HarperCollins titles that I read in the past couple of months, starting with We Crossed a Bridge and It Trembled by Wendy Pearlman. And I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Erin, Bennett, Assaf, Cohen, and Susan Nezami. So this is a really beautiful collection of oral histories. I loved this book so much. It is about basically the Syrian civil war and refugee crisis. In the introduction, Pearlman basically does give you an overview of the context, the history, and the politics for the past few generations, but the vast majority of the book is just oral histories. It's just, a sentence or a paragraph or a couple of pages of people people remembering things. They're just telling you their stories from when they were under the Assad regime to when the protests started to when the government started attacking its own people to being refugees. And it is just beautiful. It's heartrending at times, but it is just such excellent oral histories. And I love the way that these stories are arranged. I love the wide variety of people who are interviewed, all kinds of different ages and backgrounds and classes and experiences. And I think that if you want to learn more about what was going on in Syria, this is just such a fantastic book to pick up. Highly recommend it. And I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And then the other HarperCollins title that I had read was The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. So this is a sci-fi classic, and I have been trying to read some Le Guin. Some of her stuff I end up really liking. This one was kind of more middle of the road for me. So this does what she always does really well, which is it kind of does an anthropological exploration of what humans would be like in different types of kind of situations or with different types of scientific advancements. So in this story, we follow 2 types of people. There's a planet and a moon, and the people who live on the moon had basically become refugees from the planet because of their political beliefs. They were anarchists, and they've formed this community on the moon that is all about basically having the freedom to do what you want, but also working as a community. And they have a very interesting political system. But we follow a scientist who ends up leaving that moon to go to the planet. And otherwise there's absolutely no kind of travel between the two. So he's like the only one who's done this. And it's about this culture shock, about him having all of these very strong political beliefs and kind of desires of what he wants to accomplish with science, but really struggling with the culture shock of being on this planet that is very capitalist and very unequal in terms of kind of class and money and these sorts of things. And just his experiences, as well as it kind of interlaces the chapters on that with chapters about his childhood growing up and sort of how he came to be and was formed politically as well. So really great exploration of all of those ideas. But I really disliked the main character. He's just so arrogant, and I can't get behind him. He also sexually assaults a woman at one point, and it's just like all of these things where I'm like, I just don't want to be in this guy's head for pretty much the whole book. I just found it hard to get into the story a lot of the times, especially because this is so political that there's often kind of monologuing by characters about political ideas, which is just this huge amount of info dumping, which doesn't work for me. So yeah, I had a really mixed experience where I really was interested in a lot of the ideas, but I just didn't enjoy a lot of the characters or that kind of monologuing bits. So for me, this was 3.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that is everything that I read and DNF'd this week, plus those HarperCollins titles. If you guys have read any of these, if you're interested in them, you want to chat with me about them, or if you read anything good this week, I'd love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.